Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement in the hobby. I'm your host, Alyx Efron, founder of Collectors MD, and today's guest is someone whose work embodies the heart of what collecting is supposed to be about: joy, history, nostalgia, and connection. I'm joined by Brad Sauder, the founder of the Trading Card Hall of Fame, an incredible project that honors the most iconic trading cards in hobby history and celebrates the stories that made them unforgettable. At a time when the hobby feels dominated by hype, profits, and speculation, Brad's work is a reminder of what originally brought us here in the first place: the stories behind the cards, the players, and the collectors who cherish them. If you've ever found yourself longing for the purity of collecting again, the feeling of holding a piece of history instead of chasing the next big hit, this episode is going to speak to you. Brad, welcome to the Collector's Compass. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk hobby.
Absolutely. So, yeah, man, let's start with your origin story. What inspired you to start the Trading Card Hall of Fame project? You've managed to create something that feels both nostalgic and educational, right? A project that really celebrates the history of the hobby while making it accessible to everyone. So I'm curious, why don't you tell us a little bit about how that all started?
Sure. So started about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. Again, I was just laying in bed, just kind of going over what I've accomplished in my own little collecting world since I got back in 2016, and realized that it was, like you said, all about trying to find the next big thing, and trying to get cards that I could sell so I could buy more for my own personal collection, right? Try to fuel, some of that, and realized that all I was doing was getting more and more into just plethoras of cards I just really didn't care about. And I started thinking about, some of these great cards in the hobby. I'm like, you know what, there should be, some sort of like Hall of Fame for these cards, a way to get these iconic cards a little closer to collectors. So, I was kind of running through some ideas of, how do we get, the Holy Grails, the Honus Wagners, the Mantles, Gretzky's, how do we get those closer to collectors? And, I thought, well, let's honor those cards. And really, those four that I mentioned, the Gretzky, Jordan, Wagner, Mantle, that's kind of was my framework for how are we going to honor these. And obviously, that all the sports have their Hall of Fames. So I thought, why shouldn't we have that for the hobby? And after, some quick research, I was like, there doesn't seem to be a site out there. So I got my site started, and really over time just kind of built, some voters to try and make this a little more legitimate than just, me just going and picking some cards. But kind of asked for input from other collectors. What do you think about this? What do you think would be honored? And so that's how we got our first class with induct with the 50 nominees that we had last year. Some of them, I kind of filled spots because I wasn't, I didn't have a lot of, I guess, followers at that time, and so I kind of had to put together some of these cards. But the whole thought was like, how can I make these cards, accessible? And it starts with the website of, everybody can see, these iconic cards, and can really enjoy that from, at least from like the website standpoint. You can see like these are some of the most iconic cards available.
Right.
And even, trying to get into like how, if you're not going to get a 52 Mantle, can you get something that is, a decent replacement? And that's where I looked into licensed reprints. Topps has reproduced that 52 Mantle in various ways over the years, and even all of the 11 cards that we nominated, aside from the Bo Jackson, have some sort of licensed reprint available out there. So just trying to celebrate the hobby and the history of the hobby, and not so much focus on well, that mantle is a $3 million card. I mean, no, it's a piece of history, right?
Sure.
It's, it's why people got interested in collecting way back in the day. And it's, people still enjoy seeing other people's holy grails, other people's collections. So it's a way to kind of show off the true collectors and like, what do they have, and what makes that card special to you. And, why is that 89 Griffey iconic? Because at the time it, it was the card to have. And, Upper Deck was the new company, and they kind of changed, what baseball cards were. So it's kind of all encompassing, just, the celebration of the hobby and getting back to enjoying your cards and enjoying your collections and sharing that with people.
Yeah, the Trading Card Hall of Fame, it's just such a sharp, refreshing idea, right? Because it brings the hobby back to its roots. It's all about celebrating these cards that matter. They're iconic, and we're not focused on speculation here. Instead of chasing that next quick flip or hyped release, it slows everything down and says, let's honor why these cards mattered in the first place, right? And for those listening, I do have the Trading Card Hall of Fame website pulled up here. You can kind of get an idea of some of the iconic pieces that Brad is talking about. And if we go over to some of the honorees this year, you could see the 52 mantle, the reprint he's talking about, very beautifully packaged in a mag case with a custom label. Same thing here with the iconic 86 Fleer Jordan, the Honus Wagner. You get the idea. But all of this, it takes the focus off of value and puts it back on meaning, which I just think is so great. Every card inducted into this, Hall of Fame, it tells a story about the history, the innovation, the design, the emotion. It reminds us that collecting isn't just about who's hot right now or what the comps say on eBay. It's about a card, what it represents, the moment in time, the cultural milestone, a connection between generations of collectors. And what makes it truly embody intentional collecting, which is what we are gung-ho about at Collectors MD, is that it asks us to pause and appreciate rather than just accumulate. It celebrates the joy of owning something with actual purpose, whether that be the 52 mantle or the 89 Griffey, or a card that just simply reminds you of your childhood. It's about your legacy, the meaning, and not just market timing. And so Brad's approach with the Trading Card Hall of Fame really says, like, let's preserve the stories before we lose them in all of the noise. And that's exactly what intentional collecting is. It's keeping the heart of the hobby alive while leaving the hype behind. And so I really, really respect and appreciate what you've brought into this space and what you're doing. And figured it was just also worth mentioning that Brad has even included Collectors MD as one of the contributors as part of their voters panel. So in some really great company here, we've had Chris from the Smarter Collector on the podcast. He's fantastic. We post on Mantle every single day. Obviously, ComC and a lot of these shops and breakers are well known and respected in the hobby space. And so this is a very reputable group of industry leaders, and Collectors MD is very proud and grateful to be in company with all these folks. And so with that, I feel like your project captures what collecting used to mean, right? We're talking about memory, connection, emotion. So I'd love to hear from you, Brad. Maybe tell us a little bit about how that first card that really made you fall in love with the hobby, or tell us a little bit about that. And the one, that really made you realize this wasn't just a pastime, it was personal.
Well, so I got my first baseball cards in 1986. It was a box of 86 Topps. My favorite player at the time was Don Mattingly. The entire box, I didn't get one. But I had friends who were collecting at the time, and I traded half of that box just to get that Don Mattingly card. And from there, when 1987 came out, I had to get the Mattingly. And that the 87 is still my favorite, probably over that 86. Just I think because it was my first time experiencing new cards coming out. To that point, being a little 10-year-old, that 86 Topps to me was baseball cards. I didn't know about the Honus Wagners or the Mantles at the time. So when a new Mattingly card came out, um, in his white pinstripes and he's up to bat, it just it created a passion in me. And from there, as I started collecting and growing, Frank Thomas was my favorite. Griffey was my favorite. Started getting into some basketball cards with David Robinson, who was my favorite player at the time, even over Jordan. So it was really truly trying to collect those players that I really liked. They were my favorites. And I still have many of those to this day. When I got rid of, gosh, probably 20,000 just cards, just boxes. When I moved, I kept those players from them. If you want to talk value, they're probably not worth much. They're probably not even the best shape, but they're mine.
Right.
And I put them in the top loaders, and I even have books with that hold the top loaders. So I have those, and I flip through those at least twice a week.
Awesome.
Just to see that 89 Upper Deck Jim Abbott that
Yeah.
probably everybody has, and it's not going to allow someone to retire, but it was one of the coolest cards that came out at the time when Upper Deck had those triple exposures. Just and that's where kind of once I started the Trading Card Hall of Fame and kind of realized, what am I doing here? I'm collecting things I really like, and so it's interesting cards. I have cards where presidents are on them. I have not just a presidential color. It's interesting cards like that. I have some Allen Ginter of the Impractical Jokers because that's one of my favorite shows.
Right.
Again, things nobody else really is going to care a lot about, but I enjoy them. And I like
Yeah.
looking back because it takes me through the history of those.
That's awesome. And what you're talking about, Brad, I mean, like vintage collecting specifically, it was just a completely different world, right? It was pure, it was simple, it was rooted in passion rather than profit. Like back then, there were no numbered cards. There was no 1 of 10 or parallels or case hits or any of this manufactured scarcity and rarity. You didn't rip a pack hoping for a gold shimmer refractor or like a short print variation or something like that. You were just hoping to pull your favorite player, right? Like you mentioned, Don Mattingly was your favorite player, and it wasn't about chasing rarity. It was about real connection. And kids would flip cards on the playground, trade with friends, or like just tape them to their bedroom walls or put them in the spokes of their bicycles. Like the value
Mhm.
wasn't determined by population reports or PSA grades. It was determined by how much that player actually meant to you. And a creased card didn't make it worthless. If anything, it made it yours, like you said, gave it character. And so those bends and scratches, like, were proof that you carried it everywhere, proof that like it lived with you, right? And it was proof that it mattered. And so there was an innocence to it that doesn't exist anymore. You didn't need a hit to feel like you won. You just needed that one card, the one that made your heart race when you opened the pack. And collecting was about love, not leverage. And that's the biggest difference today. Modern collecting is often built on scarcity by design, where rarity is created to drive sales. And vintage collecting, in contrast, earned its magic naturally through meaning, memory, and the shared joy of discovery. It wasn't a transaction, it was a real life connection. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And so the fact that you're sort of bringing it back in some capacity, retroing some of these iconic cards and telling the stories, I mean, that's just a beautiful thing. And it really brings us back to the heart of everything you're doing with the Trading Card Hall of Fame. Cards like, I think you just posted the 1954 Topps Ernie Banks. Like when I look at that card, it's more than just cardboard, right? It's optimism, it's legacy, it's baseball history captured, in the form of a picture of a guy smiling. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And so What made that one? We'll just reference that one because you just posted it in the last day or two. What made that one stand out for you?
So, that one, yeah, that's today's nominee. And obviously, I had my nomination list put together, a month or two ago before I started posting these. But that one, when I realized that that was today, it made me smile because a friend of mine is from Chicago, and his dad was a huge Ernie Banks fan, and that's kind of a bond they shared together. Um, was Ernie Banks being Cubs fans, and so he has the Ernie Banks rookie card on display along with every Topps card. Um, Throughout Banks's career. That's his display in his office. And so when I randomized all all of the nominees, and just this one happened to be the 49th one. And so I had kind of forgotten about it until it popped up today. So that just alone, posting this card, kind of made me smile and warmed my heart, because I knew it would speak to him as part of this. And last year when I was starting out, made him a voter because he's a collector, so I know that's going to get his vote. And another one of my early voters who's been really supportive, also based out of Chicago, and today he posted on X that he's like, yep, that one's in. My comment to him was like, yeah, I knew you'd be voting for that one. So all of these
Awesome.
cards I'm posting, they're evoking memories from people, not just the voters that I have, but everybody who's seeing it and responding. I get a lot of times like, oh, I have that card, or yeah, that's my holy grail, or so it's been really inspiring just to kind of spark those conversations. And
Right.
even at times I'll post one and people, what are you doing? Like, why is that even worthy at all? Like, well, somebody thought so, because all of these nominees came from collectors.
Right. Yeah. And for those listening on audio platforms, we're just showing here the 1954 Topps Ernie Banks card number 94 that was nominated today. That's the 49th nominee. And like Brad is talking about, it's an all-time fan favorite. And it says here, as sort of a description next to an image of the card, this card is a cornerstone of baseball collecting, capturing the Hall of Famer's radiant smile and enduring legacy. Its vibrant yellow background and bold Cubs logo perfectly frame a young Banks, symbolizing the dawn of a legendary career. Collectors prize this card as the debut of Mr. Cub, a two-time National League MVP and beloved ambassador of the game. And this is what is really missing in today's landscape. People used to collect stories, not hits. And you're really keeping that spirit alive through these types of posts and everything that you're doing, Brad. So again, just really commend you, and encourage you to just keep doing this year in and year out. I really am a huge fan of what you're doing. And so we're going to get into sort of honoring some of the icons, the class of 2025 and beyond. And I want to talk about the inaugural class of 2025. So there are 11 total cards, correct? There's
Correct.
it's all legends. So we're talking about Mantle, Jordan, Honus Wagner, Wayne Gretzky, Ken Griffey Jr. Like, the lineup reads like the Mount Rushmore of the hobby, right? So what was your thought process behind selecting that class?
So the initial, like I've already mentioned, the 52 Mansell, the T206 Wagner, the Fleer Jordan rookie, the Gretzky rookie. Those, to me, those are like you said, the Mount Rushmore. Those were the first four cards that popped into my mind. I said, you know what? It doesn't matter how many voters I have. It doesn't matter where I get input from. Those four are going to be in. So the initial concept was to have 10. I was going to do 10. And it came down to the last day of voting. I had a three-way tie for the eighth, or for the ninth and the 10th spot. And when the last voter came in, it created a four-way tie for the last three spots. I said, you know what? We're just going to do 11. So, the ones that were voted in, I have no problem with them being those top 11. But personally, my vote, probably only had 5 of them. I voted on the Pokemon Charizard. I voted on Magic the Gathering's uh, Black Lotus, and also voted on the Garbage Pail Kids Atom Bomb, because again, those are icons of the card collecting hobby. And those all three of those are actually on the ballot again this year. Um, so, um, but the voters spoke, and these were the most iconic. Now, um, obviously, I couldn't get all 50, of the top most iconic into that first ballot. So there's a lot for this year that are going to be shoe-ins as well. I mean, the 51 Bowman Mantle's going to be in. The Tom Brady's going to be in. Walter Payton. As you're scrolling through, I'm looking, and I kind of already have what I think. Will probably at least be the top 5 or 6, and then I would love to see some surprises from what we posted get in there. The Bo Jackson was a complete surprise that it would be that high.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as I'm scrolling through this list, we just looked at the 11 cards that were included in this year's class, but there are some iconic cards here, man. I mean, we're talking about like the 84-85 Star 101 Jordan, the 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson, the Namath. We're talking about there was the Kobe. I love this one. This one is just like such a mark of my childhood. And this is the Topps Chrome version. This is the 96-97 Topps Chrome Kobe Bryant, with sort of like the streaking basketball graphic at the bottom of the card. Like I had so many base cards as a kid with this design, this particular 96-97 design. We have the 2000 Bowman Brady in there. I mean, this is just like, there are just so many iconic cards. The Hank Aaron, I'm surprised the Hank Aaron didn't make the list, to be honest, but it's such a.
Yeah, there were so many. I mean, that's the nice thing about this. I'm never going to run out of nominees. I mean, ever. Right. And so it was nice that, again, I pulled these, just from my personal memory and, the little bit of input that I had. And so I knew I was going to miss some, and that's this year. I mean, I got so many nominees from, all the different social platforms, from people submitting on the website, that I actually had to make some tough calls on, like, well, really, what should we see out there? And of course, there's a couple out there, the Atlantic Baseball Club team photo and the Josh Gibson, but they're literally one of ones that it's not really, attainable by your standard collector, but I felt they deserved nomination because of their historical value.
Yeah.
And they may not get the votes to get in, but they're going to be in a conversation as history of the sport.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, each one of these cards that has made the top 11 or the 11 selections of this year's class, like, are all iconic and make a lot of sense in their own right. Even like Bo Jackson might not be one of the greatest football or baseball players of all time, but like the 1990 scorecard of him wearing the football pads and holding the baseball bat. I mean, it's just so iconic, and it speaks volumes. It tells a story. I mean,
and even the history behind that image is probably enough to have it in consideration because of the licensing rights for the image, and the fact that there was a big lawsuit after the card and Nike's campaign that Bo Jackson can't even sign the card or that image any longer.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Mantle's another interesting one, right? Because it's like, as great as Mickey Mantle was, and I'm a lifelong Yankee fan, I obviously wasn't alive when Mickey Mantle played, but Mantle is revered as one of the greatest of all time, but he certainly isn't the single greatest. And so for a card like the 52 Mantle to carry as much weight as it does in the history of the hobby, I've always found to be quite interesting. And it was probably the number one card on the list if I had to guess, right? Either that or the 86 Fleer Jordan. I mean, maybe the Honus Wagner. Honus Wagner is another perfect example. Like, he's not considered one of the greatest baseball players to ever play the game. I mean, he is, but not, I wouldn't put him in the top 10. It's just the story behind the card, right? Wagner's dislike for the cigarette industry, which led to the card just being short printed or short supply, like that. Like, there was a natural scarcity that came with this card. It wasn't like decided by the manufacturer, we're only going to make 10 copies of this, like, or it's going to be a one of one. That paired with the fact that like people didn't necessarily care about like the associated value at the time. They didn't worry about the condition. It's so much harder to come across mint copies in today's day and age, now paired with the fact that they were packaged inside of cigarette boxes. But it's just, there's so much character and story that goes into a card like this, which is why it's so sought after and desired by collectors. So yeah, I mean, this stuff is awesome, man. I'm really loving what you're doing. And you know, again, like, I think you did such a good job with the packaging and the presentation. Was there a particular reason why you decided to print them in black and white?
So I actually have one of my voters does custom 3D printing and with a focus on cards in the hobby. So I had him do all of those are 3D printed, kind of almost like a relief picture. They have some texture to them, and I chose to do those for the display pieces in black and white, similar like you would see the plaques like in the Hall of Fame, you know, baseball Hall of Fame. They have the bronze plaques, or football has the bronze bust. I felt like having those kind of in a black and white, you know, almost like I said, like a plaque. I think kind of lends to some uniform display. I have all 11 of these in cases at home for display, and of course, you know, we're going to continue that with the second class that comes through. And I feel like, as a whole, you know, artistically, just they look sharp, kind of in that black and white tone of, you know, a plaque of honoring them. So, you know, I thought about having them, you know, in color, or you know, even like a sepia tone, something like that. But I feel like the black and white just really kind of stands out on those.
I agree. And another thing I thought of too is like it makes it unique. It makes it different in a sense where it's still paying homage to the original. But if it was just the original colors, it would more or less just be another reprint. Whereas like this is unique in its own right. It's beautiful in its own right. And it's sort of leaving the original color palette to the, like, it's almost like paying a respect to the original in a way, by saying like, this isn't like the original, but like it's an embodiment of it. It's a piece that you can own for a fair price that allows you to appreciate you know, an iconic card like this that isn't accessible to most collectors. So I do really love and appreciate that. And so there is like such a balance here in terms of like the cards that you've selected and you've chosen for historical value, cultural impact, storytelling. We've talked a lot about that, but how do you sort of walk that line between popularity and significance?
You know, when you think about, you know, the history of the hobby, you know, these card images will pop in your head. You know, if you're a baseball guy, football guy, basketball, doesn't matter, you know, what you're collecting is. Each individual collector has kind of just that immediate vision of like, what is the class of their particular sport or hobby or collection, you know. So that meaning is a little different to everybody. You know, like, for instance, the 1971 Thurman Munson was nominated this year, and not because it was a rookie card, not because he was, you know, again, one of the all-time great, you know, players in history, but that card's iconic just because of the, you know, those, you know, stark black border, and the action pose, which in this early 70s, action shots were very rare, and so they kind of stuck out. And Thurman Munson was a popular player, had a tragic end to his life and his career, and so he's remained a hobby favorite. And that card, it's not rare, it's not expensive, but the image is iconic.
Right.
And that's why a lot of these cards get nominated. But to the point of that Josh Gibson, that it's the only quote card that was made available during his playing days. It was a postcard, and it's significant because of that. Significant because he actually signed the front and the back of it.
Right.
And I had never heard of it until a collector nominated it. I immediately went and looked it up and had to research. Said, hands down, this is going to be nominated. It may not get many votes because nobody really knows it, but it's been memorialized at least as a nominee, and probably needs more told about it than that. So it's been so much fun seeing people pick these different cards for different reasons. The 89 Fleer Billy Ripken error card, we'll call it, surprisingly, overwhelming number of people nominated it, and even got enough votes last year to come back on the ballot this year. And one of my voters said, I understand the significance. I hope it doesn't get in ever. I'm like, I mean, I get it. It's, due to the vulgarity of it, but
Right.
it does have a historical place. It was the start of that, 90s error craze, that I feel like between that one, the 89 Dale Murphy reverse negative, and then the 90 Topps Frank Thomas no name, we had a rash of copycats. I remember the 1990 Donruss set was just an absolute abomination of error cards, and I mean, everybody was going crazy for them. So yeah, it's probably not one of my favorite cards either, but it has some significant value to the hobby as far as its place. So
yeah, I'm curious. Like I would say the most. I mean, these are all vintage cards, right? But like looking at this list, the only card from the 2000s that I see on here, I mean, there's the 2001 Ichiro, there's the 2000 Brady Bowman, but that's pretty much it. Were there any cards that were nominated from like the modern collecting era? I mean, like, I know it's hard to compare any of the cards that have come out in the last 20 years to some of these iconic pieces from the 20th century, but like for instance, like the LeBron Kobe tribute prism, like that's such an iconic card. Obviously, the time it came out right after Kobe's passing, the Lakers winning a championship that same year. I think it was the 2020-21 prism release, and it's considered to be one of the most iconic modern cards. There's a handful of others, but that's the first one that sort of came to mind. I'm just curious if folks are nominating some of the more recent cards that have come out.
So I've seen a few of them. Obviously, it's overwhelmingly the vintage stuff. But to be an official nominee, the card has to be at least 20 years old.
Okay, got it. So there is a standard.
Correct. Yeah. So it's going to be real interesting to see, as we get along and we get into the more modern era of cards that can be eligible. What do we do with, the parallels, the 101s, the autos, those kind of things. And the Kobe Bryant, I chose the Chrome specifically because it was the first year that Topps basketball had Chrome. So not just because it's Kobe's rookie, it's because it's the first Chrome release.
Right.
Uh,
I actually
so
didn't even know that. And I did notice you chose the base as opposed to the refractor. Was there a
yeah.
reason there?
Well, and that's I think where the discussion is going to come along is, you know, do some of these refractors, parallels, do they hold more significance than, what that base would be? And personally, my answer to that is, I, unless it's, a significant, unless the parallel itself is significant, and I'm thinking like 93 finest with
Right.
those refractors, like, um, I have a Mike Piazza because Piazza was my favorite player at the time, and I got that refractor. But if you're going to choose one refractor, how do you choose? How do you know which one you're going to choose? And I feel like as we go along, that that 96 Chrome Kobe kind of encompasses the refractor that goes along with it, right? And in the write up, I mentioned the refractor of that, but if we're going to start saying, well, the one of ones are more significant because they're one of ones, well, then we'll just call it the one of one Hall of Fame.
Right.
But that's not really the spirit of it. And I see more conversations being had as we progress through this. And what are we really considering significant?
Right.
Like you said, there's so many, now there's so many chase cars out there, and people always complain, well, there are so many one of ones of Otani. Well, there kind of are, but if I had to pick Otani's most iconic, I don't even have it, but it could probably be the Bowman,
Right.
over the Topps releases, or
You're talking
so
about
it's
the Bowman pitching, or like his auto, or the batting.
no just the base batting.
Yeah.
Again, that I think that truly was his first rookie card. Before the Topps Series 2 came out.
Right.
So that probably holds a little more significance than just his regular rookie, or
Sure.
even if you get into the autos and things like that. I mean, those, they're also obviously worthy of consideration, of conversation, but are they truly like the image you think of when you think of an Otani rookie card?
Right. I'm curious what you think or how you feel about the like Cooper Flag rookie that just came out in the first NBA licensed Topps flagship product that they rolled out with in the last week or two. Obviously, it's the first time Topps has had the licensing in many years, and Cooper Flag is one of the most generational talents we've seen come into the NBA, aside from Wembanyama, since we're talking about like LeBron, or at least a lot of analysts feel that way. If Cooper Flag pans out and ends up becoming, an all-time great, do you feel like the rookie card from this top set will have a lasting impact, or do you think it'll be, just as valuable as something like, a 96, 97 Kobe? Obviously, the Topps Chrome version of it will come out soon. There are parallels now. There's the one of one, I think was recently hit overseas, the foil fractor. So it's obviously a completely different animal, but I'm curious, like, based on, your knowledge and history with collecting vintage, do you foresee certain cards, even though we're in a market that's completely oversaturated, but do you still see certain cards having that sort of lasting impact from an iconic standpoint?
I do, and I'm glad you brought up the Cooper Flag. Being a Dallas guy, he's our consolation prize to Luca. So,
Sure.
I picked up a few of them when they came out. Probably overpaid for them, and I feel like, there's going to be a ton of them out there. But the significance, because it's Topps, reintroduction into basketball, and it's this iconic talent, that I think just that card alone will have some significance. If I said, people are, again, probably not going to retire off of it, but it'll hold a place, right?
Right.
Just 20 years down the line, unless he keeps playing like LeBron, but when his career is done,
Yeah.
people will go to that card, and it'll be affordable because of how many are out there.
Right.
And so again, that image is going to last.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I love that you brought up the fact that it'll be affordable, it'll be accessible, and having that lasting impact doesn't always mean that it's going to be expensive or a high ticket item. That's like collecting is so much more than that. People desire things um, for more than just financial gain and for profit, or at least that's what we're trying to instill as part of our collecting with intention mantra. And so, with that, we'll get back on track here. I kind of got a little bit off track just because some of what you're talking about I find so interesting, and I think our audience will feel the same. But something I love about your mission is how it bridges generations, right? These aren't just expensive cards. They're iconic moments, and they tell the story of how collecting shapes culture. And so what does it mean to you to help new collectors, young, impressionable collectors who are now, just getting started in the hobby, sort of access that history?
Well, I have a 7-year-old son who, is starting to get into collecting cards, and mostly it's Pokemon right now. But being able to share my joy of the collecting with him has been such a boost for me in collecting, to be able to share with him. And we don't even talk value. We do talk about card care. Take care of your cards. If they're your favorite cards, we're going to put them in a top loader, so it doesn't get damaged. Because as a young collector, I wasn't as much worried about value, but man, if it had a bad corner, it just didn't look good, right? It
Right.
wasn't that, oh, it's got to be preserved for value sake, but I wanted it to look pretty, and it didn't. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to instill that in my son, and we're going through, and honestly, the first card he asked for outside of the Pokemon was a volleyball card.
Interesting.
He wanted a volleyball card. He's never played. We watched it a little bit with the Olympics, and but he wanted a volleyball. So I went out
Cool.
and I found a $2, I think it was a Topps Chrome, from the Olympics, that it was a volleyball
Sure.
player. So
Awesome.
he handed that, and then the next thing, he wanted golf cards. So we went to the card shop and we bought a pack of Upper Deck Golf, which
Awesome.
led to me buying a box of Upper Deck Golf. Um, because to me, I think golf just perfectly lends itself to cardboard, right? Just
Right.
with the beautiful scenery, and you, you know, you don't have so much the crowds in the back. It's just the subject on a beautiful outdoor course, So
Right.
yeah, I kind of got sucked into that, but just sharing with him the things that we like. If that's what you like and you want to collect, then that's what we're going to go after.
Love it.
And it's been such a joy being able to share that with him. So
Right.
that's kind of what I hope to instill in the young collectors. I was at a show a couple weekends ago. The sole person promoting the Trading Card Hall of Fame. I took some cards I wanted to sell, so actually I paid for my table with some of what I sold, so that was good. But I just took some cards with me. Um, Again, not high value, but really cool. I gave out probably half a dozen White Langford Cosmic Chromes
Yep.
to kids. Again, being Dallas based, and we're actually a little closer to where the Rangers play than being in Dallas. So it meant something to them. And even there was a little girl that I gave a card to, and I was like, "Do you like baseball?" And her mom goes, "Well, she does now." Just because I gave her that card, and I
Yeah.
had more. There was more joy in giving those out than actually selling a couple that I did.
Right. Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's about paying it forward and collecting with intention, collecting what you like, not what social media or the marketplaces or your favorite influencer is telling you to buy. So I love that you're instilling that into your son, and I hope that the parents that are listening will start to do the same with their children, because right now we are in a really unfortunate space within this industry where kids are just it's being normalized at such a young age that the gambling mentality, the chasing, the flipping, the profit chasing is the norm, and that's what collecting is, and that's not the case. And so I love that you're sort of democratizing nostalgia, right? Making the Hall of Fame feel accessible, even if it means you'll never own the original Mantle or Wagner, you can still belong in the community. You can be a part of the history, and that's just such an amazing thing. So we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is the joy factor, why the hobby needs storytelling. And so in our back and forth leading up to this episode, I think you said this in one of the emails you sent me. It really stuck with me. And it was that I think I was a lot like those testimonials, right? Buying cards I didn't really care about because I was hoping to find something. And that's such an honest reflection, right? How did you catch yourself in that pattern, and what shifted once you started collecting around themes and meaning again?
Well, honestly, it was looking around my office and just seeing piles and piles of cards that, you know, a lot, once I started collecting in 2016, I started snatching up those cards that I couldn't afford when I was a kid, or, really meant something that maybe I gave away. And then, Topps came out with that Topps Now, which to me was really exciting because, they were making cards immediately of, things that just happened, right? They were
Right.
memorializing these historical events. So I kind of got into those and then realized, well, Topps had a whole bunch of other online stuff that, they'd release for short periods of time, so I got into that and said, well, if I could buy those and sell some of those, I could actually kind of fuel my hobby.
Right.
Right. Not trying to become a breaker or a card shop owner, which I think would be a heck of a lot of fun. I don't know that I'd be any good at that part of it, but I thought, if I make a little bit of money and, turn that into, pay off those cards I bought and use that little extra to get stuff I really like, then I kind of break even. Well, I wasn't really breaking even, and I was just accumulating and hoping maybe I could turn something, but yet still trying to buy these things that really meant something to me. And so even before I started the Trading Card Hall of Fame, I had kind of shifted to we're not going to do that anymore. You know, let's just try and get out of all the stuff that I have, you
Right.
know, and I'm not at this point, I'm not even worried about breaking even. I'm just worried about getting stuff out of the office and then
Right.
keeping those that really mean something to me. And
Right.
even to the point, I think I may have even told you about, I have an Ichiro project that I put together. It's Ichiro in vintage card styles, all the way, started with, the 51 Topps game before they made their 52s, all the way through, present time. And even, other releases, the T206, some from the 1880s, 89 Upper Deck, just really got me into using that to celebrate, again, the history of hobby. And it just happens to be Ichiro. I have over 100 different, release versions, through the years. And that has brought me so much joy with, actually collecting. Yeah, I'm still chasing, these designs, but it's not, I'm trying to chase and flip. I'm trying to chase these. So I have this themed chronology of the card history, you know.
Right.
I'm starting another kind of small piece that's artwork cards of Frank Thomas, from different inserts and things from the 90s and things like that. Again, they're not expensive cards, but they're interesting,
Right.
and there's theme to it. So that's how I've kind of shifted my collecting focus is on these things, players, White Langford, he's a big up and comer here in the Dallas area. And so, having his rookie cards memorialized in, and even 1990 Topps, one of my favorite designs. I made sure I picked up one of those this year for White Langford because, again, they're interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome. I was going to quickly plug Chris and the Smarter Collector platform. by showing you the one Langford that I still have in my PC. If I can switch screens here. And there we go. So it's nothing crazy. It's a nice card that I pulled a couple of years back. You know, the orange sapphire on card rookie of Langford. I
Yeah.
was a fan of his penmanship. Pretty awesome. So I'm definitely pulling for him. You know, nice card that I carried over to, I guess, what you could call my final PC. Is I've completely downsized my collection to the point where, you know, it's like 5% of the volume that I once had, maybe less. We're talking about like not even 100 cards. But this is one that made the cut, and I've always just really enjoyed and appreciated. So awesome. With that,
beautiful.
thank you. I appreciate that. And you know, I'm one of those collectors who it just has so much more meaning when I hit it myself as opposed to just buying it.
I was going to say, the fact that you said you pulled it is even better.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And again, like I try to embody the intentional collecting mindset, and I'd like to think that I did to an extent, even when I was in the throes of my addiction, where I collected for a purpose. I collected because I enjoyed the cards, and if I hit something big, I didn't just see dollar signs. I like knew that it had associated value, but I cared more about, you know, adding it to my PC, owning the prized possession, rooting for that player now. Like that's always been a huge part of it for me as a collector. So I know you feel the same, so I figured it was worth sharing that. So one of the things that, you know, really stands out about your work with the Trading Card Hall of Fame is that it's joyful. You're clearly very passionate about this. You really genuinely enjoy the storytelling as opposed to the speculation. And so why do you think that joy has been lost in so much of modern collecting, especially as it pertains to this younger generation of kids and young adults?
I mean, really, it's that flipper mentality. It's that gambling, taking a chance. It's the dollar signs. I had a conversation with someone in the hobby a while back. Similar to you. He was kind of not really interviewing me, but we were kind of talking about, well, why am I doing this and yada yada. And I kind of mentioned that trying to get away from just the hobby being about just dollars and the flips, and he kind of said, well, that's kind of what the hobby is now.
Right.
And not wanting to really ruffle any feathers, I didn't really combat him on that, but it just kind of hit me. I'm like, it's not why I'm doing this. It's not
Right.
it's not what I'm here for. And yeah, I mean, there are people that are out there that are making good livings off of this. They're making a lot of money, and that's awesome that they can do that. But there is still this collection of collectors who are collecting because of the joy, because they enjoy just having these things, right? And being able to show them off. That's why I have two display cases hanging on my wall of my favorite cards. Because that's what it's meant to be. I mean, I could put them in a safe deposit box, and never see them, but at least know they're safe. In fact, my dad and I were talking the other night about some of the ones I have on there, and he's like, you really need to put those in the vault. I'm like, well, it defeats the purpose. I want to be able to look at them. I want to see them,
Right.
And I mean, as far as value goes, I have insurance. So, if something were to happen, then financially I would recover, but I don't know that I'd ever be able to buy those cards again. But
Right.
that's not what it's for. It's because they're mine and I love looking at them. And,
Right.
I love people who come into my office and they see them, and I love talking about them. One of my favorites, people may not even know it exists. It's a Otani on-demand 3D card that there are only 269 of them made. But to look at it, just looks like one of the other, top Topps cards with the same pose, but I
Right.
love it because it's got that 3D look. It's interesting, you
Yeah.
know, and
That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, look, modern collecting, for all its flash and innovation, it's just largely turned into a numbers game where dollar signs, come before discovery, and every release is just tied to comps and ROI and resale potential. And instead of people asking like, do I actually love this card? Do I like the way it looks? Most collectors are conditioned to ask like, what's it worth? First thing that most people ask, right? And it's just become transactional. It's just an endless loop of just buying, flipping, and chasing with very little room left for joy. And what's wild is that most people don't even realize that that's happening. It's not that they've suddenly stopped caring about the hobby. It's that they've been slowly rewired by a system designed to keep them consuming, right? The breaks, the buy-ins, the promos, everything is just built to trigger impulse and reward cycles that mirror gambling psychology. And it's subtle, but it's powerful. The longer you're in it, the easier it is to start believing that collecting is the chase. And so your success as a collector ends up being measured by hits, not happiness. And we want people to know there's still a heartbeat in the hobby, like you're talking about here, Brad. There's still a group of us who collect because we love it. Because a card can, represent something like a memory or a player or a moment in time that money, just can't touch. And that spirit hasn't disappeared. It's just buried under all of the noise, all of the content, all of the, the chaos with live streams and such. And what we're doing at Collectors MD is trying to bring back that feeling and to help people slow down, question the system, and rediscover why they started collecting in the first place, to remind them that joy doesn't come from chasing, it comes from connecting. And so intentional collecting isn't about walking away from the hobby completely. It's about reclaiming it. It's about, breaking the loop and realizing that you don't have to be a cog in someone else's machine. You can collect differently on your terms, with meaning, with purpose, and with peace. And I truly think that everything that you're doing with the Trading Card Hall of Fame 100% aligns with our mission and our approach. And that's, obviously one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show and, have this conversation. So we have a few more questions on this segment, and then we have two more. I know we're already coming up on an hour, which is crazy, but we'll try to sort of hit the turbo button a little bit just to be conscious of time. I know you got to get back to work. So I think like you're right. Like somewhere along the way, we replace connection with just comparing ourselves to others and other people's collections. And so I'm curious how you see, or how do you see storytelling as a tool to bring back that joy into the hobby?
Well, I feel like, kind of some of the cards that we've talked about, like it's not just the picture that's on the cardboard. There is a story behind that. It's 52 Mantle was the first, official big Topps release. The Hannes Wagner, with the reason why those cards are so rare because he was so anti-tobacco. Even the Josh Gibson being, the only card, the Bo Jackson, that, there was legal lawsuits at the time because of that
Right.
image that's on the card. And even, getting into, well, that Kobe Bryant Chrome is significant, not just because it's his rookie card, but because it's the most popular card from the first Chrome basketball, right? So
Right.
when you learn these things and you're able to share those in conversation with people when you're talking about these cards, when you're talking about the merits of that Wyatt Langford that you have, again, as you're showing it off, the thing that, like I told you, the thing that picked me up was like, I pulled this card. Like this
Right.
wasn't, I went out and spent, a fortune, because it is a fortune to get that one, right? I didn't go spend a fortune on it. I came across it naturally, and your excitement in the fact that you did that. My Chrome Gold Kyle Tucker autograph did the same thing. I pulled that out of a pack, and my gosh, that's the prettiest card I've ever pulled out of a pack.
Awesome.
Not that it's the most valuable, but it really is a good looking card.
Yeah.
And that I think being able to share that with people
Yeah. Yeah, that's special. And I'll be honest, I don't even know what the Langford is worth. I haven't checked the comp in I don't know how long. I know he had an up and down season. He has a lot of promise, a lot of potential. His first Bowman cards were fetching top dollar when he was like the hyped. Was he the number one pick?
No, I think he was second or third. But
Second
I
or
mean,
third. He was
he
a
was,
top prospect. And
yeah.
yeah, like I've had it for 2 years. I haven't even looked at it in terms of like trying to figure out if it's worth grading or whatever. Like, yeah, sure, it looked nice in a PSA holder as like a PSA 10, auto 10, but like it's in a nice mag with my collector's MD seal on it. Like that's good enough for me. Like I know I'm not going to sell it, even if I get a couple $100, $200-300 for it. Like it's I care more about, again, the storytelling, the meaning behind it, what it represents, and also the opportunity to now root for this young superstar who has so much potential. And so I think that's like the beautiful part of collecting, especially as it pertains to sports cards and real life athletes and things like that. So again, everything we're talking about here ties into what we talk about at Collectors MD: the intentional collecting, the slowing down, the finding meaning, the remembering why we collect in the first place. And again, when we anchor in story instead of hype, it just changes everything. And so we're going to transition over to the next segment, which is bridging generations, collecting versus now, which we've already sort of started to unpack. But Brad, you've been around the hobby longer than I have. I'm going to be 36 next week, and I grew up in the 90s. I've collected my whole life, but I wasn't really re-immersed into the hobby until early on in the pandemic. And so you've been collecting for decades, right? And you've seen the full evolution of this space. And so I'm curious, from your standpoint, what's changed the most for you between the vintage era and now? Maybe not just as it pertains to the industry, because we've already sort of talked about that, but maybe in regards to the actual cards.
Also, my collecting heyday when I was younger was the entirety of the junk wax era, where way overproduced and all of that stuff. But saw a lot of these innovations. The inserts, the refractors, the autograph chase cards. So going from just the cardboard, to some things that look nice and people literally wanted to go get, regardless of what perceived value they had. But man, those are just some really sharp looking cards, But seeing that innovation in the 90s of just the different things that they could do with these trading cards. And then, like I said, I got back into it in 2016. And man, gosh, so much was out there. I mean, Topps was the only, it still is the only licensed baseball card manufacturer. But Panini had the player license, so but gosh, just everything, and yeah, trying to figure out what parallels are and the numbered cards, and just the so many options and just the overwhelming amount of stuff that out there was just wild. But
Right.
there was even more progression into the technology and development of a hobby now, with these on card autos being kind of the norm, as things that are in the packs, and a reason to go, yeah, I want to go buy a box and hopefully get an autograph card of a guy I like, but with all of that also comes that greed that you see of the flippers, and like, yeah, everybody's just talking comps, and
Right.
and that's all the different Facebook groups I'm in, the different socials are like, okay, well, what's this worth? Or like, there's not really nearly as much like show off. Hey, look what I got! It's so cool.
Right.
I found a subreddit called "Coffee and a Card" that I've been a part of for a couple of months now, because it's literally people just posting their cards and a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever it is. But it's literally just there to show off stuff, and you know what? It's not always the fancy stuff either. It's just a 1991 Fleer Michael Jordan because it's a cool looking card,
Yeah.
or, and that's caused me to go dig into my collection and pull out, the different ones to show off that meaning. But yeah, just somebody who wants to get into it today, it's just too much. It's
Right.
just overwhelming.
It really
But
is.
yeah, to be a part of it, you gotta
There's a
be there.
learning curve. There's like a
Yeah,
major learning curve, and the oversaturation, especially with Panini, just product after product, and the case hits, and the inserts, and the subsets. I mean, it's overwhelming. Different versions of a color blast, and downtown, and kaboom, and
yeah.
like case hit, the manufactured scarcity. Like there was a car designer in a boardroom one day that said, "Hey, let's cartoonize some of these athletes and throw the word kaboom on there with you know uh, a, a flashy looking parallel, and it'll sell." Sure enough,
Mm.
like who decided that that was going to be what was hot? Who decided that like downtowns or color blasting? Yeah, like sure, they're cool looking cards, but when you compare it to something like an 86 Fleer Jordan, like it's apples to oranges. It's not even in the same stratosphere in terms of what the card looks like. We're not even looking at the same thing, right? So it's all about perspective and how you look at it, and just making sure that again you're collecting what you like, not what the internet tells you to. And
Hmm.
so again, like the purity, it's just it's missing now. And so back then, like the hit was the memory, it was the moment, and now it feels like the hit is the only point, right? And I'm curious, like why do you think that shift happened? Just in terms of you'd open a box of cards and you'd be interested in sorting through the base and seeing if maybe you hit like a few guys on your team, or um, a few cards that you were missing from the set you're trying to build. Like you weren't just looking for the numbered parallel, where like nowadays breakers just brush over all the base, they put it aside, and they're
Hmm.
just looking for that numbered hit or the auto or the insert or whatever.
Yeah, and
Why do
some
you
breakers
think
don't
that
even
shift
ship.
happened? Most
Yeah,
breakers
they
don't
won't.
even ship the base anymore.
Yeah, yeah. That and to me, I'm like, wow. I mean, no, send everything to me if I'm going to participate in that, which I haven't in a long time because yeah, it was fun just kind of see what's out there. But yeah, I mean, it was fun to kind of flip through and see what you could get. But I mean, for me, it wasn't. I was, oh my gosh, I better hit something bigger. I've lost all my money. It's like, no,
Right.
I paid to, get a handful of cards, and yeah, maybe there's something really cool in there, and probably not. But I mean, I have terrible luck when it comes to those anyway. But you know, like you mentioned, the pandemic is really kind of being that line of demarcation when a lot of people came into the hobby because, oh, look, people can make money off these things, and it became so overwhelming that most of those new collectors are really that's their whole chase, right?
Right.
It's a small scale, stock market, or like I said, gambling. Instead of having to fly out to Vegas, I'll just hop into a break and maybe hit something that I can just turn around and sell. So now
Yeah.
I've made money. They don't. I mean, the fact that so many places now, even eBay has the vault, PSA has a vault, ComC, like, I mean, I love ComC because they have so much stuff out there, but you know, you just buy and trade commodities at this point. You're not even seeing the physical cards half the time.
Yeah, that drives me nuts. With breaking, they have quick and sign on hand now, where they're like, you hit something big, quick and sign is on hand to help sell you that card. They'll list it tonight on eBay and they'll pay you out by the end of the week. They don't even ship the buyer the card, the physical card. It just becomes
Yeah.
so transactional, and it's no longer collecting. It's just gambling. We're just trying
Mhm.
to buy into something and hopefully profit. And what people don't even realize is that the chances of you profiting are so marginal compared to even traditional gambling or day trading, or any other form of risking potential uh, money for a gain. You're talking about like what, a 2% chance of even making your money back if you're joining like a player break or a team break. I mean, it's crazy. And again, like that purity is missing now. And we talked about this a little bit earlier as far as like, will modern cards ever hold the same historical or emotional weight as vintage cards? Probably not. We're in a completely different era. The cards now, it's just the saturation, the number of parallels. There's no longer real scarcity. It's all manufactured. And, it's just also because of the nature of how people are consuming the product. And it's just no longer what it once was. And that's unfortunate, but, times change. And I think there are other ways that we can, again, find that purity again, and go back to the days where collecting was a meaningful and fun-filled activity that wasn't all about the chase. And so I'm curious what your message is to young collectors coming up in this landscape, those who maybe only know the hobby as just breaks and chases and resale.
I mean, if I feel like this true collecting, comes from the subjects that you want to collect. If you're a baseball fan, basketball fan, I think that's where it starts, right? If you're a diehard Mavs fan and you want to start collecting Mavericks stuff, cards or memorabilia, whatever that is, start with that passion. Don't just go buy a pack or a box and just, with that mindset that I'm going to get the hit, right?
Right.
Because then you don't, what is it? It could be, a like lower level first baseman autograph, right? Oh, you got an autograph. Well, do you like the guy? No. Well, then, was it really a hit?
Right.
So, but start with like what you have that passion in, and then collect, whether it's cards or memorabilia or keychains. But
Yeah.
you have to start with a passion of the something, and that kind of is going to drive you into what you're going to collect.
Right. Yeah, it's refreshing to hear somebody else just talking about collecting as a form of storytelling instead of speculation, and that's exactly why perspective matters, and it's what we need, in today's day and age. So really appreciate that. All right, we're going to shift over to our final segment before the rapid fire round, which we'll get into shortly. But I'm curious about the future of the Trading Card Hall of Fame. And so you've mentioned a dream of a traveling display or bringing these cards physically closer to collectors across the country. I think you touched on that in your daily reflection that you wrote back in July. That accessibility feels so in line with your mission. So what would it take to make that a reality?
Well, we talked about, I think I've told you about the class of 2025 packs that I'm selling. That
Yeah.
actually, that's how I'm going to hopefully, be able to fund some upgrades to the website, to be able to get out to some shows. Like I said, I went to a show a couple of weekends ago with that sole purpose of displaying the 11 cards that got in, and just kind of being that traveling display for right now. But just being able to share that experience with collectors. Like I said, the website needs some upgrades. I want to be able to reach out to people like yourself, or other folks in the hobby, to add some content. Either stories that you've written, or even like the Smarter Collector. I just recently got connected with him, and what he's doing on his site is phenomenal. And that's like, I want to be able to provide some of that same, level of knowledge and education to collectors, but really still just to celebrate the history of the hobby, and be able to grow it that way, and be able to share it. And like I said,
Right.
if I can start making the shows as, the traveling display, where all it is just people come by and see the cards that have gotten in, and maybe talk a little bit of the history, talk a little bit about, what's their collecting story, but just being able to share.
Awesome. And when you go to purchase one of these packs on your site, let me just share the screen one more time here. What exactly is the customer getting? Is it? It's not the black and white reprint that we were looking at earlier, right? It's just a
No,
licensed
no.
reprint.
So yeah, so they're going to be licensed reprints either from the original makers, Topps, Upper Deck, Fleer, Score, or well, yeah, the original Bo Jacksons are in there. But there's also graded originals of 8 of the 11 mixed in there. I don't have obviously the Honus Wagner, the Mickey Mantle, the Babe Ruth. Those are a little outside the budget to include, but there's even a 33 Gaudy Lou Gehrig SGC graded in there. But it was just kind of a way to, again, bring these a little bit closer to collectors. Like I said, there's 57 different types of licensed reprints in there amongst the 11. All of the cards that are in these packs feature one of those 11 that were inducted. So I mean, it's very
Awesome.
themed. The cases are sealed and serial numbered. So they tie directly to the checklist that we have out there. So you'll know that particular reprint came straight from the Trading Card Hall of Fame. But
Cool.
like I said, there's that, the fun factor, the chase element, if you will, of getting one of these iconic cards to add to your collection. And while it's not for everybody, it's really not even designed like for a flipper. If if you think you're gonna buy one of these and immediately turn it around, you're probably not going to.
Right.
But if you want to be able to add a piece of history to your collection, whether it be a reprint or even one of the originals, it's a way to celebrate in that hobby. Putting these packs together, there are 500 of them. I've sold some, not a lot, but I've sold some. But
Yeah.
putting those together was the most fun I've had in this hobby in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And it was just getting the collection, seeing the different versions. I think there was 11 different mantles. One of them was a gold chrome version.
Right.
The Clementes, I think there were 13. One of them is the rookie medallion relic that they did a few years ago. So just some really neat things. And even there's a couple of the Bird Magic rookies that are chrome refractors.
Right.
So even some of the reprints are, rare or chase worthy, so to speak. So, but there's just really cool stuff in there, and I even bought some extras so I could have some of these, and I've shared those with my son, so he now has his own little Trading Card Hall of Fame collection started. So
Awesome. And you talked a lot about that in your daily reflection, purpose over profit. That assembling this class of 2025 and putting the packs together was one of the most fulfilling parts of your collecting journey, not because of profit or making money off these 500 packs, but more so because it sort of ignited your joy. And I think that's awesome. You came up with a project that sort of checked the boxes in terms of helping you refocus and dial back, how you're collecting while also giving back to others. And I just think that's an amazing thing. And so what's next for the Trading Card Hall of Fame? I know you're working on things like the class of 2026 nominations, which you've been posting every day, and possibly things like educational programs. And, we just talked about the traveling display. But is there anything else that is sort of on the docket that we can expect to see in the coming months?
Right now I'm getting through the nomination posting and the voting, which tomorrow's the last nominee, and then Alex, you'll be getting your ballot via email
All right,
on
I'll be sure to
Saturday.
fill it out. Awesome.
Yeah. So and we'll be compiling that, and then I'm gonna try and make out some more shows here locally. Just try and get the feelers out and try and grow it, but really. Since I'm not going to be doing packs for 2026 yet, because again, I haven't had quite the traction with the 2025 packs yet. But that is something I'm going to keep in my pocket for future, where now I'll be able to mix in more of these inducted cards. So maybe that becomes kind of a bigger thing. I would like to see something grow with that. Ideally, I would love to be able to take these and make actual like 5 to 10 card packs of some of these reprints, if we could find them
Right.
inexpensively. But, since I won't be doing that for 2026, I'm going to have more time to maybe focus on growing the content within the site and growing more of our voting base. I more than doubled from what I had last year, but I still ideally would like to have probably about 2 times more, voters from the hobby, and then being able to, you know, have that presence where people are having discussions about, well, is this really worthy, or how do you collect, in fact, even the website, I posted my Ichiro project on there, as I've been adding, the different things, so you kind of see how I collect, so really just expansion of the site and expansion of the conversation of collecting and enjoying. So
Awesome. And I love that you're building community through this too. It's not just a site, but it's an actual movement, and you're getting people engaged and involved. I mean, you tag me on X almost every day, and I see the people responding. It's an awesome thing. And so, how can collectors get involved in things like the nominations, the voting, the storytelling, etc.?
joining the Trading Card Hall of Fame on socials. If you go to the website, there's a submission form that you can click and submit your cards. There's even you can contact us to be considered as a voter. Depending on how you're involved in the hobby, what you do in the hobby. I'm always looking to try and add on best I can. But you know, send me ideas too. What would you like to see? You know
Right.
what what can we do this, because it's just me, and one head alone doesn't always get the best ideas, but the more people get together and can talk about these things, we get more ideas, we get more traction. you
Yeah,
know
absolutely. And yeah, there's actually something else that just came to mind that I'm going to ask you once we end the live here. So remind me. But yeah, man, you're making the legacy of collecting interactive, and that's rare. And most hobby content today is just about consumption and profiting, and you've turned it into participation. And so again, I really commend you for that. I think it's an awesome project, and if those that are listening want to get involved, I encourage you to go check out. It's tradingcardhalloffame.org, and I'll flash it on the screen here one more time. And then follow Brad and the Trading Card Hall of Fame on social. So one last question before we hit the rapid fire round. What's one dream induction you'd love to see in a future class that maybe wasn't nominated this year?
if it's personal for me, it's
Yeah,
it's going to
personal.
be the 1998 Topps Chrome Dirk Nowitzki. He's my all-time favorite, probably athlete. Matter of fact, he was in consideration for nomination this year, but I didn't feel like it feels like a bit more of a niche card. But if there are slowdown nominations, I'm still sitting there and I'm going to vote for it.
Awesome. So with that, we're going to get over to our final segment, which is the rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask you a question. First thought, best thought, whatever comes to mind, you shoot it, and I'll just keep going. There's 5 questions here. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Favorite card design of all time?
1990 Topps.
Awesome. Most underrated set ever made?
Man, 1990 Topps again. I just love the 90s. That I guess for just the out there design that it had.
Awesome. You're breaking up there a bit, but I think we got the the majority of what you said, 1990 Topps. So what's one card that perfectly captures the spirit of collecting?
It's going to be the Wagner, the T206 on its Wagner. That is just, I think anybody who's a true long collector, that's what pops in your head is the whole trail.
Awesome. Still a little choppy, but we only have 2 questions left to get through. So I'm going to ask them and we'll hopefully be able to hear your answer. So what's your personal Hall of Fame card?
My personal Hall of Fame card that's been inducted or that it's just that I consider in mine.
Like the number 1 card on
Any
your
card,
personal Mount Rushmore.
Gosh. It's going to be the 86 Fleer Jordan or the 79-80 Gretzky. I just think those are just, with the coloring on them, I think they just stand out.
Yeah, can't go wrong with either. If you could hand 1 card to every new collector, what would it be and why?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Is it kind of as a collection starter? I would say it would have to be something iconic. If I just had them in my pocket, I would say let's start with the early history. It's going to be the Wagner. It's going to be the Mansell. I was like, these 2 cards are here. Why you collect?
Great answer. Brad, this was such a refreshing conversation. You've been so gracious and open throughout this entire process and sharing your platform, promoting positivity and collaborating with groups like ours at Collectors MD. That kind of cross-community energy is what keeps the hobby grounded. We lost Brad there, but hopefully when he watches this back, he will see and hear just some of these sentiments. There he is again.
Yeah.
No worries at all. But Brad, I just wanted to thank you for everything you're doing to preserve the heart of the hobby. The Trading Card Hall of Fame is more than a project. It's a preservation of our collective history and a reminder that joy and not profit is what makes collecting meaningful. I'm going to just draw a quote from the daily reflection you wrote. You closed your daily reflection with a line that I think just captures the spirit of what we're both trying to build. And that is collect with purpose, let joy, not profit, lead the way. And that's exactly what the hobby needs right now. So for everyone listening, you can follow Brad at Trading Card Hall of Fame on social media and visit tradingcardhalloffame.org to vote for nominees or explore the Hall's incredible archive. If you're struggling with compulsion, burnout, or that constant chase feeling, you're more than welcome to join our free confidential Collectors MD peer support group every Wednesday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific, or checked out our unboxed, powered by Collectors MD group sessions. Those are Thursdays at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific. You can also stream this episode of the Collector's Compass and all past ones, as well as our other 2 podcasts, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD Features, on all major streaming platforms. This is the Collector's Compass. I'm Alyx Efron, reminding you to collect with intention, not compulsion, and we'll see you next time.